What is up, everybody, and welcome into the Blogger Bowl College Football Week 3 recap. I am Dan, joined by Mr. Matthew Rooney. Matt, how you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. That was a surprisingly fun weekend of college football, despite getting what we thought might be a pretty bad slate. And it still was a pretty bad slate, but it was a fun bad slate. Like there was a lot more chaos and drama than there probably should have been. So I enjoyed watching that. And we took our medicine last week, and now we get our good stuff. Now we get the dessert, and this week looks absolutely awesome.
We do this thing every year where there's one week where we look at the slate and we're like, yeah, this slate's kind of crappy. And then it always ends up being fun.
Sometimes it does end up being really bad. This one was bad, but fun bad.
I feel like there's a crap slate every week that has something silly, ridiculous, awesome in it. And this week was certainly that. And it was not a game we talked about last week because we did not anticipate it being close. But there's only one place that we can start our recap show this week, because where else can you do anything in college football these days without discussing the Colorado Buffaloes? Colorado 43, Colorado State 35. First and foremost, to give credit to the winners,
Colorado State just committed another personal foul.
Shedeur Sanders is a dude. He put his team on his back with his best weapon out and led an impressive comeback. He is so calm in the pocket and can pick apart a defense when he has time. It was an impressive performance. But it brings me to my next point. I've mentioned it on the show before. Bobby Knight always had a saying, dumb loses more than smart wins. Jay Norvell's decision-making cost his team this game. For 58 minutes, he coached circles around Deion Sanders and then choked with the game on the line. Colorado's best shot of winning this game was to stay aggressive, and Jay Norvell turtled with the game on the line. Colorado could not stop crossing routes all night. You gained 6.31 yards per play, 7.78 yards per dropback. You have a 4th and 2, which opens up your entire playbook, but instead of trying to salt the game away from the Colorado 45 on 4th and 2 with 2 minutes left, you opt to punt. What's the worst that can happen? Colorado scores? Okay. If they do, the best they can do is tie the game. Then you'll have some time on the clock and 2 timeouts and just need a field goal to win. The punt was one of the best punts you'll ever see in that situation, and it didn't end up mattering. Why did it not end up mattering? Because
they sat back in a soft zone. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you've been pressuring Shedeur Sanders all night, and it worked. And then it's like, no, we're going to rush 4. We're going to sit back 8. We're going to let them pick us apart. Go ahead. Sorry, that just pissed me off so much.
No, that's where I'm going. Colorado State had 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss in the passing game. I think I saw today this year, Colorado State has lost more rushing yards to sacks this season than any team in college football. For the season, Shedeur Sanders is the 2nd highest graded passer so far, according to PFF. When he's pressured, he drops all the way to 13th. Still a good number, but Nebraska showed last week and Colorado showed for large chunks of this game that the way you slow Shedeur Sanders down is to speed him up and get him off schedule. So despite the fact that you're generating good pressure all night, you decide to only rush 4 and drop into a soft zone coverage, like you just said, to give Shedeur Sanders all the time in the world to matriculate the ball down the field for a touchdown. Then Deion gives you a gift by winning the toss in overtime and taking the ball first, and we can talk about that in a minute, but he gives you the ball first, which eventually sets you up with the possibility to go for a 2-point conversion to win the game in the first overtime, and you kick the extra point to keep the game going. His players deserve better, and Jay Norvell let them down. I want to put this into some historical context, but I do want to cede the floor to you to get the rest of your thoughts other than the soft zone on what happened late in that game.
That was the biggest all the things that bothered me you mentioned all of the things that bothered me, and they were almost close to equal. But for me, it was, you have this guy on the 2-yard line. You've been pressuring them all night. I think they even tried a run on the first play too, and it got stuffed. So it was like 2nd and 10 from your own 2. They have 98 yards to go. They don't have their best receiver in Travis Hunter. He's obviously out. Why is this? What's crossing your mind? It's like, you know what we should do? We should play 10 yards off the ball. We should drop the safeties way back. We should not get beat over the top here. It's not like there were 30 seconds left on the clock. They had a minute and a half in their timeouts. Just keep doing what got you there. It's been working. Why do we just have to abandon it because the rules of football say we need to, play prevent defense late in games and protecting the lead? We can't get beat over the top. What you're saying with the punt. What's the worst case scenario here? You bring pressure. They somehow get a ball off. Somebody sneaks behind. Colorado goes for a big touchdown, and then you get the ball back with a minute left and some timeouts and a field goal. Also, they still would have to get a 2-point conversion. So They need 2 full scoring plays. Who the hell cares if you get beat over the top for a big play? Obviously, you don't want to do that, but they hadn't really done that to you all night. He took exactly what Norvell and his staff were coaching a near perfect game up until, what was it, 8 minutes or 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And then it was like, nope, we can't do that anymore. We gotta start playing the smart way, because the smart way is apparently how clearly inferior teams upset teams on the road that are better than them. I don't know. That was so infuriatingly dumb.
So the thing that kind of blows my mind even more is like the aggressiveness was kind of your calling card in this game. Like Jay Norvell put himself in the story. He made himself part of the narrative with the sunglasses comment. And I think the hype that created actually was kind of genius, even though I don't know that it was intended, because it got Colorado out of sorts. Colorado was more focused on the bullshit surrounding this game and like the thumping of their chests and the rivalry and all that than playing football. And it really had them out of sorts for large chunks of this game. It normalized over the course of the second half, but at least early, it allowed Colorado State to kind of take the game to Colorado. That said, let me put this in some historical context, which is going to make it just seem even dumber what Jay Norvell did in this game. So even though Colorado has been bad for a while, Colorado State is always fighting an uphill battle against an in-state rival in a power conference. They're never going to have the resources Colorado is. By my calculation, by what I looked up, I can't think of any other instances. Colorado and Colorado State, and now the victory bell between Miami and Cincinnati, I think are the only in-state rivalry games that are annual or close to annual that are now between a group of 5 team and a power 5 team. So Colorado State is always going to be fighting that uphill battle against Colorado. For the last 100 years after Harry Hughes was done running the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference, this program at Colorado State has been an afterthought. They have 5 double-digit win seasons. They haven't won a conference title since 2002. Sonny Lubick is the only coach they've had in a century to elevate this program long-term, and he was let go in 2007. Jim McElwain had their last 10-win season, and then he left for Florida. He was replaced in 2015 by Mike Bobo, who was an uninspiring offensive coordinator and an even more uninspiring head coach. After an underwhelming 5-year tenure, he was let go, and then Colorado State made a baffling decision. They decided Urban Meyer should be the guy that hires their next coach. He suggested Steve Adazio. That disaster lasted all of 16 games. People actually liked the Norvell hire. He had recruiting chops from his time at Oklahoma and Texas. He was doing a good job at Nevada before Colorado State poached him. It seemed like this was a move to get the program moving in the right direction. And the hype and hoopla of the Deion Sanders era has benefits for its opponents. Derailing the Coach Prime hype train would have been a watershed moment for Colorado State. It's the kind of win you can recruit on. It's the kind of win you can fundraise on. If it wouldn't have been the biggest win in school history, it would have been on the short list. Matt, 9.3 million people watched a game on cable that started at 10:20 p.m. Eastern. It's the 5th highest rated game in ESPN's college football broadcast history. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain, and Jay Norvell completely botched it.
Yeah, I mean, you hit that right on the head. It's not like he did, like this was a trend throughout the game too. Like throughout the game, they were clearly out coaching Colorado. They had the personnel to match with them. They were doing things that Colorado just wasn't simply adjusting to. Like if I saw one more shallow crossers play just completely work and then go for 15 yards that Colorado wasn't adjusting to, I was going to like yell at my TV, and I didn't even care who won the game. I was just rooting for a good football game. Like, they had the advantage for 58 of the 60 minutes and then just decided to completely give it up. Like, you're not as good as a football team as the Colorado football team was, but for that night, you were out coaching them. Why are you just abandoning that to do what is by the book, quote unquote, what you're supposed to do as a head coach? I just don't, I completely don't understand it. On top, like if Colorado doesn't commits 5 less penalties, excuse me, Colorado State commits 5 less penalties too, like they win that game running away. It's not even close. There's not even a fourth quarter drive to go away. Like just the incredible, like I can live with players shooting themselves in the foot. That's going to happen. Like especially a Colorado State team in a rivalry, a passionate game. A lot of those were penalties of, personal foul, passionate, like overhyped type of stuff. That's going to happen with kids. Did they do too much? Absolutely. But when your coach then kind of succumbs to that and gives in, that's where I think you can't really live with that. That's a tough one to live with.
Yeah, I mean, it just absolutely.
Also, that illegal blindside block late that wiped out the Colorado State touchdown. You can't call that. If that was a Colorado receiver that laid that block, that flag never would have been thrown.
Oh, now we're getting into refs. We're getting into conspiracy.
No, I think overall the refs were fine. Like I was in a group text, which by the way, I had my group text on a Saturday night was popping off at 2 a.m, and none of us were out at all. I was sitting at home watching football games, so that should tell you how good the football game was. It was the group text that was nonstop at 2 a.m. Mm-hmm. Like some people were like, "Oh, that the late helmet targeting shouldn't have been called." Like no, like they got the calls right. Like that was a really bad targeting. There were like most of the personal fouls on Colorado State were like, oh, another one. But then you see the replay. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that was the right call. That illegal blindside block was tough. That was a tough one for me.
This
especially to effectively end a game.
My last thought before we move on, this was like the worst case scenario of an outcome because either Colorado wins by a lot and we get the kind of betting windfall going forward that I was hoping for, or Colorado State wins and it's kind of hilarious. But Colorado winning like a gritty, I mean, it's a cool story. And again, like, okay, I guess this is my final point, and this is kind of like the thing that annoys me about some of the hype surrounding Deion is how it's about Deion and not his players. And I know he talks about it, but like everything he does is self-serving and always has been. Like, it's pretty fucking cool that like the best quarterback, and at least one of the best quarterbacks in the country, has been Deion Sanders' kid. And I don't care how you feel about Colorado or Deion Sanders. Seeing Deion Sanders' kid wearing the number other son, Shiloh, wearing the number 21 jersey and returning
pick that ball off and run it back.
That touchdown is cool. That's awesome. So anyway, so the biggest game on the schedule that
also Shedeur is, I don't want to take away from his drive because Colorado State was sitting back. Shedeur Sanders is really awesome. Colorado obviously has some problems in the trenches, and we've kind of been hinting at that for a while, and I think it really got exposed by Colorado State. Again, credit to Colorado State's coaching plan for 58 minutes of the ball game, not 60 though. But I think we're going to start to see that as they get into conference play in a really good Pac-12 schedule coming up here. Like Oregon plays physically. Dan Lanning's a defensive-minded guy. Like it went from 14.5 points before kickoff of Colorado State to 20.5 by the time that game ended. So
it was up to 21.5 when I wrote it down.
I saw 20. Okay, that might be what it's at now. I think right after the game though, to show you like one game changed it by 6 points. I think they're going to struggle a little bit here coming into Pac-12 play, but I still think we're going to see Shedeur Sanders still do some pretty cool stuff. Travis Hunter, when he gets back healthy, do some pretty cool stuff. Like they got the skill guys. There's no doubt about that, but the trenches are the issue. Maybe not as big of an issue as we thought they would be preseason that would hold them to under 3 wins, because that's probably not going to happen, but they're an issue.
Yeah, the bill is coming due on some of the problems that they have in the trenches, and I don't know, like, I'm concerned about
it. If this was a Pac-12 of like 2 years ago, they might be fine, or fine-ish, but with this Pac-12 and how good this Pac-12, we have 3 ranked matchups in the Pac-12 alone this weekend.
Right. Yeah, like it. I'm a little concerned about his ability to do cool things with how bad their offensive line is. The biggest game of the weekend on the schedule, that at least seemed, or at least the most interesting one, Florida 29, Tennessee 16. I use the term proof of concept a lot. It's become a buzz phrase among the college football blogging / podcast community. To put it more simply, as the Bobs in Office Space said, what would you say you do here? Physicality. That's what Florida showed on Saturday night. They ran the ball well with Trevor Etienne, and they kept Joe Milton from hitting the big plays. They limited Tennessee to a 38% success rate. So Tennessee was just not able to sustain drives. Joe Milton did not look great, missing on a lot of throws. You have UTSA this week, and then a stretch of South Carolina, A&M, at Alabama, at Kentucky. It feels like we're inching closer to Nico time there, but we've kind of ragged on Billy Napier. He's been a man in the crosshairs a lot, and Florida playing great defense and running the hell out of the football is an identity. They finally showed it. And I mean, there's a clip, you can just go find it, of a Tennessee DB just not wanting any smoke whatsoever, trying to tackle, I think it was ETN, on a running play. Like the
Florida
Tennessee
just bullied them.
The Tennessee vibe is kind of soft, if we're being honest about things, and the Florida identity was pretty solid. So this is the kind of win that Billy Napier got and needed, and he got it.
It was absolutely, like you said, that's a perfect way to put it. Billy Napier really needed this win. Sorry, I'm looking. Is this Josh Heupel's? Is this year 3 for Heupel at Tennessee?
3.
Okay, so he's still kind of getting his guys into the program. I think this is what be. He's still got some guys from leftover classes. This year is going to be a step back. I've been vocal about how I like him on this show, and I still think he's going to be a very good coach for Tennessee. And I just think this is on a lesser scale, similar to what we saw with Illinois last year going into this year. They had a really good year. They had a lot of really good pieces, and everything kind of was a perfect storm for one year. But the program isn't quite built to sustain the losses of those top guys. I think you're seeing that a little bit with Tennessee. Like I'm so happy none of us bought into the Joe Milton hype on this show. Joe Milton is not very good at quarterback. He can throw the ball very far. He can throw the ball very hard. That's really cool. But he's not a very good quarterback. And a lot of that Tennessee team, at least the depth that they didn't have to use last year, is now starting in a lot of places this year. And you're kind of seeing that that's not quite up to snuff. Now, recruiting at Tennessee has been better with Heupel. Obviously, Nico is coming in, who knows, maybe even this year at some point if things continue to go this way for Joe Milton. I think in future years down the road, they're going to get themselves to be at a point, maybe to be where they were closer they were last year. But this, for me, is a Tennessee team that's just kind of not built to sustain the losses of Hendon Hooker, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, like these Darnell Wright, like these star players that they lost. Like it was a perfect storm for them last year. And now they have to survive that. Not quite built for it yet. I think they'll get to that point. They're just not there. And credit to Florida. They ran the ball really well. They played really fired up. Trevor Etienne, I'm proud of myself there. Ran the ball really well. What's the other running back? I always forget his name.
Montrell Johnson.
That he ran the ball really well too. They just bullied Tennessee. That's all. Like they were a bad matchup for Tennessee because that's what they wanted to do. They did it well, and they just punched the Vols in the mouth. They didn't really have an answer for it.
Yeah, that's kind
except when they tried to square up at the end of the game. Then I guess they kind of had an answer for the punch in the mouth.
And then
I love watching two dudes square up like they're going to box when they have face masks on.
Although the one dude from Tennessee, from Florida, looked like he wanted that smoke.
Yeah,
like he looked like he was ready.
That was a good representation of the game. The Florida player wanted the smoke, and the Tennessee player kind of was like, "No, I wasn't serious. I was kind of kidding."
Yeah, and like that's, I mean, I think that's a fair, like, your point about what they lost is good, and that the transfer portal additions and some of the guys they had left over just haven't quite lived up to, like, it just kind of goes to show how good Jalen Hyatt and Tillman were. But like, I think from a philosophical standpoint, Tennessee is going to have to find some of that toughness. If this is what Florida is going to be going forward, we know what Georgia is going forward. Fortunately, and I'll get to it a little bit later on in the show, maybe, like, fortunately for Tennessee, it looks like maybe the Alabama train might be derailing, but we'll talk about that. You brought up Illinois. That was your game that you were most interested in this weekend. Penn State was on the road. I didn't write down the final score.
30 to 14 or something like that?
No, 30 to 9. 14.
That is 14.
Oh, no, they did, because they almost blew the cover. They tried to blow the cover for me. What did you see from Penn State? What did you see from Illinois? What stood out to you about that game? I watched some of it.
Illinois had some 30 to 13, excuse me. Illinois had some fight early on, but it was just kind of a team that just wasn't as good as Penn State. They came out, played pretty decent in the first half. They did their best to hold on home field advantage. And then, as you see a lot of times in these upset bids like that with lesser teams, the better team just kind of pulls away because they're the better team and they have the horses while the other team doesn't. So I know the score doesn't necessarily look great for Illinois. Honestly, they probably kept it a little bit closer than I thought they might have. Like, I thought this had like 40-7 type potential, especially after the effort we saw from U of I against Kansas. But I thought they came home. I thought they fought pretty hard. And hard to say you're impressed by a 30 to 13 loss, but like, I was impressed with at least how they played in the first half. And I'm still fine with what Brett Bielema is building there, but also Penn State, good to see them kind of have a little bit of a sleepy first half against a frisky team on the road that plays hard, and then come out in the second half and assert their dominance.
Yeah, I will say, like, I will give Bielema credit. Their defense, which has struggled so far this year, they bowed up and, like, against a good opponent, played really well. The problem Bielema's always going to have is he's just not a guy who's going to be like, I'm just want to go be awesome on offense. He's always going to kind of want to be, let's play great defense,
Ball
let's run
control.
the ball.
Yeah.
And like when you just don't have that, like that's a problem. Penn State, I'm still not that I'm out by any stretch of the imagination, but I saw some stuff from Drew Allar in this game that made me take a little bit of pause on him. Which is just to say, I mean, he's starting his third game. So like, I mean, we forget like the hype came in, like top 3 recruit in the country, so on and so forth. I might tell a story about him later this week on the show, how it relates to another team who has a big game this weekend. But he made some throws. I was like, oh, okay, there's the arm talent there. I think he's still kind of in that developmental phase, and with some big games coming up, that's going to be kind of something I'm keeping an eye on. They didn't really do a ton on offense. They just had more talent and kind of wore Illinois down and kind of outclassed them there. My game that was on under the radar, or no, just my game that I was most interested in, LSU 41, Mississippi State 14. Boy, my LSU can still very much win. The West take is aging pretty well.
I was wrong. I was wrong.
My take that LSU can still win the West is aging pretty well. This was such a Brian Kelly game. Just go out and dominate an inferior opponent.
I just didn't know Mississippi State was this bad. I thought they'd be friskier. I didn't realize. You told me. Hey, hand up. That's on me. Yeah, I bought in a little bit too much to the win over Arizona because I'm so high on the Pac-12. And in my head, even though Arizona's not that good, I think Jaden Delora is like awesome, and I love watching him play. So in my head, that was like, oh, it's a good win against a frisky team at home. Wins. No, just no.
No,
okay.
The winning a game by like 4 points or in overtime that you had a +5 turnover margin in is a major red flag. Play within the game. It's what I said. Jaden Daniels, 30 of 34 passing, the highest single game completion percentage rate in LSU history. And he recognized early Mississippi State could not defend Malik Neighbors, who had 13 catches, 239 yards, 2 touchdowns. My preseason Mississippi State under 2.5 conference wins bet is also looking very good.
That looks pretty good.
Now. The defense is really bad, and the offense is in a bad spot. Even though the Leach offense is diametrically opposed to the triple option flex bone, there's a similarity from one standpoint, which is you have to have specific players to fit the system. And if you change the system but keep those same players around, you're going to have problems. Their offense is bad. Zach Arnett's in over his head, it seems like right now. And because he's a defensive-minded coach, but he's also the head coach, their defense has regressed tremendously. It seems like they're going to be bad. They're going to, unfortunately, for a guy who took over under tragic circumstances with Mike Leach's death, it doesn't feel like the Zach Arnett thing's going to last very long. They're going to have to pivot probably sooner than later. One bet that I already have on the card this week, they're at South Carolina, and South Carolina's laying 5.5. I know South Carolina's got some injury issues, but I just, and I'll talk about the South Carolina game probably later. I continue to be impressed by like the newer and more mature Spencer Rattler that we've seen. I think South Carolina probably just has too much talent and under a touchdown. I like South Carolina at home in that game.
Yeah, LSU just, there's not much more for me to say about it. Like LSU just came out from the jump and was the better team and it literally asserted their dominance, and it was never really close. It was never really in doubt. Like they were clearly the better team. Mississippi State was not nearly as frisky as I thought they'd be.
The other eye-opening result of the weekend, Alabama 17, South Florida 3. Alabama had a negative 0.52 EPA per pass play without throwing an interception, which is kind of crazy. South Florida, I wrote South Alabama. South Florida generated 5 sacks and 8 tackles for a loss. I just don't understand the vision here. Sometimes there's political things in play when you're dealing with quarterback battles, recruiting, NIL, whatever, but there is none of that at Alabama. Alabama was willing to give the job to the best quarterback, and Milroe won the job. And after one loss, you panic benched him.
It wasn't even that bad of a performance either. Like, it's not like they lost 41 to. He wasn't good, but he did a couple good. Like, he did a few good things, and they had a chance to win the football game in the fourth quarter. It's not like they got blown out on their home field and scored 10 points. Like, in theory, he had a chance. They didn't win the game. He wasn't perfect by any means, but like, he can at least make plays.
He does. He can throw a pretty deep ball and he can run the ball. Everything else as a passer, he's really, really poor. And that's a problem. But Tyler Buckner is not the answer. Everyone knew Tyler Buckner wasn't the answer. And it speaks pretty poorly of Ty Simpson that he was the third quarterback up and he looked really bad. The bigger problem beyond the quarterback but what makes this even more baffling is the fact that the Alabama offensive line is legitimately been like the worst in the country. Like, we're not talking about like, oh, well, there's like relative to other Alabama offensive
Mm-hmm.
lines, they're playing badly.
So it's
Relative
just
to
been really
every
bad.
other offensive line in college football, Alabama's playing bad. It is jarring to see how bad Alabama's offensive line is, which to me makes the decision to bench Milroe even more baffling, because at the very least, if your quarterback's going to be on the run the whole game, at least play the quarterback who is the best on the run.
Yeah,
So
I thought I saw something floating around Twitter like Milroe got benched for something that he did during the week. I don't know if that's
there's,
necessarily true. Obviously, there's probably a million stories that pop out like that, but
yeah,
they did say he's starting already next week, which
yeah,
I mean you had
he's
to
back.
do either
Like,
way.
of course.
But that would also line up that if he got like a 1 game suspension from being the starter, I don't really know. It was weird, but yeah, we've been talking about how they don't have like the dudes on the outside and the playmakers, and now it doesn't seem like they have the dudes up front either. Like that was I mean, this whole year has been a very strange performance from them, and it's hard to believe that like these recruiting classes have been that big of misses, because I'm sorry, with Alabama finishing top 3 in recruiting rankings every year in the history of the world, it seems like there's no way this recruiting class can just be that big of a flop. At this point, it has to come down to coaching. Like there's something going on. There's something in practice. Like, and I don't. If I had, was it Greg McElroy doing the game? Was he one of the? No, it was RG3, I think. Which
Yeah.
I think it was him who just kept saying a million times. And I swear to God, now I've heard it. I think I probably heard it 25 times over the weekend. Like, well, Nick Saban relies a lot of times on his players to police and kind of coach themselves and lead themselves, and it doesn't seem like this group has that. I swear to God, Dan, I heard that from RG3 15 times. I heard it from like that. The amount of times I heard that from everybody else, either Nick Saban is telling that to the media or someone on his staff is telling that to the media, to almost be like, guys, this ain't really on Saban. This group is just really, really not good.
This team just sucks.
That's kind of what I'm guessing.
I'm not going to launch into my rant about Deion Sanders putting everything that is wrong with college football on a platter for the world to see that other coaches have done a good job at hiding forever. I'm going to stay away from that. All right.
That's probably a good idea.
I'm going to use an analogy here, and I don't think it's Deion Sanders' fault. Never mind. All right. I'm going to use an analogy here, Matt. You ever had a friend that was dating someone toxic? They eventually break it off. That friend meets someone new, starts doing very well in all aspects of their life, but eventually breaks it off amicably with the person they were dating. Life's moving in different directions. We're on different planes, whatever, but it's an amicable split. Then they go back to their toxic ex. That's how I feel talking to Georgia fans right now. Todd Monken goes to the Ravens. Lamar Jackson is cooking again all of a sudden. Georgia brings back Mike Bobo, second Mike Bobo reference on the show, who was a coordinator under Rick, and the offense looks very uninspiring right now. Kind of boring, kind of unimaginative, kind of blah. Doesn't matter. Tennessee's a pretty big downgrade from last year, and I'm not sure if Florida has upgraded enough. But yeah, man, like when Georgia, if there's a really great team this year, that a really great offense that Georgia goes up against, it might not be such an easy fix for them. Like if it's not an apples to apples, but if they played a team on offense that was as quality as the Ohio State team played in the Sugar Bowl last year, I don't know that Mike
they can keep up.
Kind of what they have this year is good enough to keep up. Not sure it's going to matter. Not sure they're going to play anyone who has the capability of doing that to them. But it is just kind of funny, and allow me to play the world's tiniest violin for Georgia fans who have to watch an uninspiring offense. And like I said, I came away really impressed with Spencer Rattler. Their offensive line is awful. Juice Wells, their star wide receiver, had screws inserted in his foot this offseason. He scores a touchdown in this game and then re-aggravates the foot and leaves the game. Like they're just lacking the depth to be able to compete with Georgia for 4 quarters. But man, I think we've entered the territory of Spencer Rattler. Like, remember Spencer Rattler was like, oh, this guy as a freshman was like, oh, this is a potential number 1
pick.
And then it's like, Spencer Rattler's not good. I think we've kind of found our level with Spencer Rattler, that I think a team's going to take like a 2nd, 3rd, 4th round shot.
I was going to say mid to late round pick,
and see what they can develop out of him, because I do think he has shown some nice maturity since the end of last season.
Yeah, I mean, the raw ability's always been there with him. It's the maturity and seeing the field, and if the right team gets him into the right situation, he's absolutely worth a flyer. But yeah, George, I'm still willing to give George a little bit of time, but the offensive coordinator change, and like you said, kind of going back to what didn't always work, is a little bit concerning. But they're also breaking in a new quarterback. They got some moving parts on offense, and it just like even last year, like was it Kent State gave them trouble for a little while before they kind of ran. So this team can sometimes take a few weeks to rev up, and I'll believe it when I see it that a team can catch them. But as of now, the way the offense has looked, like we talk about how a team like Michigan might be more built to beat an Ohio State than built to beat a Georgia. But if this is how Georgia's offense, a team like Michigan might be built to beat whoever, like a team like Notre Dame who plays physically and can, as a quarterback now, they can put up a lot of points. Is that a team that can maybe give Georgia trouble if they get into a track meet? Like there's more questions about that Georgia team than there were at any point, I think, last year. And last year's team also had a lot of turnover, at least on the defensive end. Like this, with the new quarterback, with the offense looking like it's sputtering, yeah, and it seems like college football seems to be, coming more at the level. Like they're water meeting its level. There seems like more and more teams that can compete for a college football playoff, compete for a championship this year. The parity seems to be there. I think there are a little bit more questions. Can Georgia get got? I still think they're the best team in the country. I still think they'll be in the national championship game, but 3 points at home against a bottom feeder ish team in your conference is not a good sign. I don't care who you are.
Oh, I agree totally.
Now they
Matt,
did come out in the second half and put up 21
yeah,
like
they
it was
handle their
nothing
business.
and there
It's
was
what
no
they
problem.
do.
But
Yeah. Hey Matt, remember the my whole dumb loses more than smart wins thing? That does not apply when you have Harrison motherfucking Mevis. Missouri spikes the ball with 3 seconds left at the Kansas State 44. Eli Drinkwitz decides to try a 56-yard field goal, but loses track of time and takes a delay of game because they don't have any timeouts left. So now it's a 61-yarder. And
don't
what does
matter. I
Mevis
got your
do?
back, coach.
Bangs the
I
longest
got your
made
back,
field
coach.
goal in SEC history at the buzzer for the winner. Perfect college football game. No notes. The best show in college football this weekend was Colorado State. The second best show in college football this weekend was Mevis and Butthead.
I didn't watch a ton of that game because I liked it. It was good. I was smiling. I didn't watch a ton of that game because I was flipping between a bunch and I was also watching my parents' dog for the for a lot of the day. But I did tune in time to see that kick, and just from where this kid has come from missing the 20-yard chip shot to beat Auburn last year to drilling a 61-yarder at home to upset a ranked Kansas State. Like, this is awesome. I love there's nothing like a thick kicker. It's just he's an electric factory. He's an absolute electric factory. That kick was awesome. That game was awesome. Missouri is all of us. Like, Missouri's a frisky team in the SEC too. They're probably not going to win a ton of games, but they're going to play some teams tough. That was just that game was college football. That was a fun college football game.
Well, it was just still college football. Real quick, I have two other points I want to make. First, vibe check the Big 12. Cincinnati lost the victory bell. Iowa State lost to Ohio thanks to a weird field goal that was probably good that they ruled not good, but nevertheless. And then Matt
Campbell almost killed a fan.
Tried to fight a fan. Houston got worked by TCU after losing to Rice last week, and Oklahoma State got absolutely curb stomped by South Alabama. Bleak times in that league. And then the final point I want to make, Matt, I am begging the AP poll voters, which I know the AP poll doesn't matter even a little bit anymore. Please be flexible with your rankings. Washington, number 8 in the country. Are you fucking kidding me? This is the best team in the country right now. Right now,
Huskies.
Through 3 weeks, Matt's Huskies have been the best team in college football. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to be the best team by the end of the season, but right now, they are the most deserving team of the number 1 ranking. Michigan hasn't played anybody. Florida State was terrible against Boston College. Texas was bad against Rice, bad against Wyoming for 3 quarters. Georgia's been uninspiring. Washington, I know like Boise State may not be as good as people thought they were going to be. Michigan State's a complete disaster, but they have completely just destroyed everyone they've played. Michael Penix Jr. is awesome. That offense is awesome. And if they struggle, you move them down. If Georgia plays somebody good, you move them up. If Michigan just destroys Rutgers and then blah, 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 blah. If Florida State just dominates Clemson, which is very much on the table, then Florida State's the number 1 team in the country. I get it. You can change it. But right now, Washington is way, way better than the 8th best team in college football.
I would love to see because the college football playoff rankings do actually like take a lot of that into consideration. A lot of times they'll vary. Like, I would love to, and that committee I'm sure has mock-ups week to week, and they kind of have a rough estimate. I would love to see where they have Washington rated right now, because that should absolutely be the best, at least the top Pac-12 team, which would be a top 5 team at least in the country. They have an amazing offense. Michael Penix Jr. is somehow better than he was last year, even at least it seems like that now. Like, he's gotten better, and they're playing defense. Like, their defense is solid. They haven't gone up against the best team. They haven't gone up against the best teams yet. They've also gone up against better teams than some teams we're talking about. Like their non-conference is better than USC's, was better than Michigan. Like they've gone up against some real opponents, but they're just dominating. Like Boise State, they struggled for a quarter, and then they beat 41-16, like absolutely blew them out of the water. Michigan State, they maybe struggled for 7 minutes, and then absolutely blew them out of the water. Like Washington looks absolutely dominant. They have like, we're going to learn a lot more once conference play runs around, because that Pac-12 is really good, but they look incredibly impressive. And like Michael Penix Jr. he's not right now because of how media views Caleb Williams and then certain players in college football. Michael Penix Jr. should be the front runner for the Heisman Trophy right now.
I'm Caleb Williams until those
followed by Handsome Sam.
Well, my Heisman rankings were Harrison Mevis, Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, Shador, and then Handsome Sam. To me, I don't even care about the Heisman until Washington and USC play. Then we can kind of have the discussion from there.
That's fair.
Because I think whoever wins that game is the Heisman winner in my mind. I mean, we'll see if
the very least,
if Florida State runs the table, if Texas runs the table, if Notre Dame runs the table, their quarterbacks in the discussion. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Nevertheless,
would Sam Hartman's handsomeness give him some more points?
I told you.
I think it should.
You can't trust a quarterback who's too handsome. Like, look at Carson Beck and look at Sam Hartman, and you tell me which one's more likely to win a national championship. Anyway, we turn the page, Matt. We look at the schedule for this week. I can't count how many games I wrote down because there are some awesome ones, and there are some interesting ones. I'm just going to read off games that I kind of wrote down spreads and totals for that I find interesting. Wisconsin at Purdue's a dog shit game. Wisconsin's a 5.5 point favorite. The total's 53.5. But I only bring that up just to mention somebody's got to win the West, and it's probably going to end up being Iowa. Rutgers at Michigan. Michigan a 24.5 point favorite. The total is 44.5. Rutgers, to their credit,
they're frisky.
It's not frisky. The first not awful team Michigan has played this year, and the first time. And I know Maryland had a little bit more ceiling than Rutgers did last year. Remember when Michigan had to play a real team for the first time? It was that Maryland game last year.
Maryland had the ball midway, late in the fourth quarter, with a chance to go, and Talia just threw an inexplicable interception that was
Maryland interception. It's basically that.
Yeah, and I think Michigan, one of their touchdowns came off like a weird turnover that bounced off a Maryland player's helmet or something, I think on the opening kick, and it gave them the ball on like the 3-yard line. So yeah, that was it's also funny that we're talking about Rutgers being the biggest test for Michigan so far on their schedule in week 4.
That's how it goes. The second or third biggest game of the week, Florida State at Clemson. Florida State, 2.5 point favorite on the road, 55.5 is the total. We'll obviously do a full breakdown of that game on Thursday, but my teaser for that game is this might be like, if the Church of Dabo is ever going to rise again, this is a game where they have to do it. Oklahoma at Cincinnati. Oklahoma, a 14.5 point favorite, a total of 60.5. Oklahoma has looked very, very good so far. Again, their schedule's been very soft. I don't think Cincinnati's very good, but I'm really hoping we get a breakout performance from one of my favorite players in college football, the Godfather, Dante Corleone from Cincinnati, a defensive tackle who's 318 pounds. And Matt, it was work to get the young fella down to 318. He's a Cincinnati native, and let's just say during the pandemic, and this is not even a joke, he spent a lot of time at Skyline. And so they had to kind of work to get him down to 318, but he's awesome. Interested to see Oklahoma. I will say, as much, I detest everything about Oklahoma. Given how soft the Big 12 looks right now, the fact that they don't play Kansas State, who's kind of been their boogeyman, none of the books have it right now, but Oklahoma to make the playoff is a bet I would consider right now, just because it seems like they're trending in the right direction, and that conference looks a little bit down. That's my thought. They'll
probably have to beat Texas twice.
Potentially, and Matt, they only have to beat Texas in the Big 12 title game. If they lose to Texas in the regular season and they're 11-1 and beat Texas,
fair, but
they have a 1 game leeway.
Yeah,
unless they have a 1 game leeway, and it's the Texas game, they can. It would be fascinating, Matt, if here you go. I hate scenario season. I fucking hate scenario season, but here we go, Matt.
I love scenario season.
Whoever wins the Texas Oklahoma game goes 12-0. Whoever loses the Texas-Oklahoma game goes 11-1 and then beats the other team in the Big 12 title game, and they're both 12-1.
You got to see who else is around.
I know.
Who else is
but it's
around.
just like a scenario I just
Texas,
thought about.
Texas has the advantage because provided Alabama doesn't totally shit the bed. Texas has which is possible. Texas has the Alabama win. I think that gives them the advantage, and I think Big 12 is not getting two teams in the college football playoff. Like the around college football is so deep this year. Now, could it cannibalize itself? Sure, but like I think if you have 2 1-loss teams from the Pac-12, you're getting two in there before you're getting two in from the Big 12. I think the Big 10, if Michigan and Ohio State are both 1-loss teams again, I think, or Penn State even this year. Notre Dame is a team that if they end the year with 1 loss with their schedule will be in the college football playoffs. I think there's too many. Florida State obviously is having a schedule that's going to line up to either probably be undefeated or 1 loss. There's so many candidates this year. Granted, we say this every year, and we're in week 3, and they start to pick themselves off, but it's tough for me to see 2 Big 12 teams getting it with how down the conference is outside of those 2 teams this year.
Life finds a way. Anyway, Auburn at Texas A&M. A&M a 7.5-point favorite. The total is 52.5. I have no clue if Auburn's good, but I'm taking 7.5 points against A&M. I don't care. I know it's at home.
Yeah, like it's weird because I want to bet on Connor Wegman because I really like him, but I just don't trust the rest of the team and the coaching.
I don't trust A&M to win this game by more than 1 score. So I took Auburn there. Colorado at Oregon. It's 21.5. The total 70.5. We've talked a lot about Colorado. We'll talk about this game on Thursday. UCLA at Utah. Utah a 4.5-point favorite. The total 51.5. Utah being a 4.5-point favorite here leads me to believe that Cam Rising is going to make his season debut. I've heard some things that seem to suggest that. We'll talk about that game. Jesus Christ, we have so many good games to talk about this week. 4.5 points. So we'll say
get ready for a long show next week.
Thursday's going to be a long show. Ole Miss at Alabama. Alabama a 7-point favorite. The total 55.5. I don't want to back Alabama, and we'll talk about this game on Thursday. I don't want to back Alabama, but I am a pretty big fader of Lane Kiffin as well. So God, who knows there. Oklahoma State.
Yeah, but I think they keep it close.
I don't know what the deal is with the 7. The 7's an interesting number. We got 4 minutes. Oklahoma State at Iowa State. I don't care about the spread. The total 36.5, just kind of hilarious. The Pac-12 championship game, because these are the only 2 teams in the Pac-12. Oregon State at Washington State. Oregon State a 2.5-point favorite. The total 56.5. We'll talk about that on Thursday. We have what I have dubbed the college football Twitter nerd Super Bowl as App State visits Wyoming. Just the vibes immaculate. Wyoming a 2.5-point favorite. The total 44.5. Texas hits the road to take on Baylor. The Longhorns a 14.5-point favorite. The total is 51.5. Iowa at Penn State. Penn State a 14.5-point favorite. The total 40.5. And then the biggest game of the week. Ohio State at Notre Dame. Ohio State 3.5. Total 54.5. Not officially on the card. Give me Notre Dame in the money line. We will talk.
I've already placed the wager on that. Got it at plus 145. Yeah.
All right. I love it. We'll talk about that in greater detail when Phil is here on Thursday. But Matt has to get to a noon Eastern, 11 a.m. meeting. So we will wrap the show for now.
One thing before we wrap.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm very upset that Oregon State, Washington State isn't the Pac-12 after dark game because I'm going to Notre Dame, Ohio State. And my parents have a cottage about 40 minutes away from Notre Dame Stadium. So once the game's done, after traffic into the car, we're pretty much back there an hour after the game's done, which is great. But it's so much better when you have an awesome game that's midway through the first quarter when you get home. I mean, Washington will be on at least. Like they start at 9:30, so probably able to catch the last 2.5 quarters of that one. But I was really hoping Oregon State, Washington State, ranked on ranked would be Pac-12 after dark, and I could wind down after a nice big Notre Dame win with a glass of whiskey and some ranked on ranked Pac-12 matchups. But that's okay.
Yeah,
I'll watch my Huskies.
Usually Texas gets the big TV by itself, but on Saturday night it might have to be Texas, Baylor, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and then that Oregon State game.
You might need to turn the brightness down on your TV for Notre Dame. The all green with the gold helmets and Ohio State shiny silver might be a little bright. It's going to be beautiful, but might be a little bright on that HD TV, Dan.
Oh, and Iowa, Penn State. Yeah, hopefully YouTube. I'll save my YouTube TV rant I'll do a good YouTube TV rant on Thursday because it is the biggest YouTube TV multi-view weekend of the season, and I will do my rant about YouTube TV. So I will save it for that. But we appreciate everyone who tuned in. I think we had a really good show today. It was a lot of fun. We will be back on Thursday. Phil will join us as we can break down all of the games. I'm just going to go take a walk while they talk Ohio State for 45 minutes. But shout out to Phil. Shout out to Matt. I'm Dan, and we will talk to you guys on Thursday.